Well, Dapper, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, this looks like a very unique and interesting game.
Yeah,
I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, Lucah is a very interesting little game. Am I good to go ahead and
go ahead.
Here?
We're all good.
All right. Well, hello everybody. Hello DreamHack, or hello everyone watching the stream. I'm Rin, or TheDapprFox, and I'm here running Lucah, Born of a Dream, the game you see here on screen. It is a animation-driven character action game with a very in-depth and unique combat style. And I'm going to be running the neutral ending on easy. It's just the fastest and the way I prefer. The only real thing that differs is enemy aggression and things like that. And time is going to be starting here in a second after I input my name here. Thanks to the Lucah community, I put up a poll there the other day, and they decided that we are just going to be using the default name for our main character, which is Lucah. All right, and time is going to be starting here in 3, 2, 1, and go. All right. So, again, this is Lucah. It is a character action game, meaning most of the combat is driven by combos and light and heavies and things like that. So we're starting off here in track -1, which is our tutorial level. And there's not really much to be said about this. It's mainly just enemy positioning, getting through the level, making sure we skip over things like the dialogue as quick as we can. Not really a lot to it. So this is a good time for me to describe the basics of combat and things in this game. So we have light attacks, we have heavy attacks, which you'll see me using pretty much throughout the run because it's the bread and butter. We'll get some more mechanics later on, and I'll talk about those when we get them or when we use them. Here we're going to pick up our familiar, which is, if you've played Nier Automata, it's kind of like the pods in that game, where each of them has a unique ability. And this one here just fires off a little bullet, which does decent damage. And it'll tide us over until we get to the next area. So for those of you who've played things like Dark Souls or, again, Nier, things like that, this game takes pretty heavy inspiration from things like that. Its main ones are like Yume Nikki, Dark Souls, Bayonetta, a couple of others, Devil May Cry. Like most of the character action games you think of when things come to your head, like you'll see little bits and pieces here. So we just picked up hold actions, and we're not supposed to be doing this yet. This is a parry, or not a parry. This is a taunt, which you're supposed to get late in the game. But thanks to a glitch in an earlier version of the game, we're able to use it pretty early. Kind of ruins the story significance, but that's fine. But what I picked up back there was a hold action, which you saw me use just a moment ago. It was just a little explosion. So we're just going to die to this boss. It's fine. It's fine. Doesn't matter. It's a little faster than fighting him normally, because that is a pretty difficult starting boss. But most of the difficulty in Lucah, in both the actual game and in our speedrun here today, comes from precision at combat and precision, navigating the world, things like that. There aren't very many glitches or real things like that yet. The only real one we have at the moment is early taunt and a couple of other intended ones, which we'll see throughout the run. So I just picked up Impulse here, and what's that? All right, there's an egg splattered on the ground over there. We're not going to talk about that. But this is Impulse. As you can see, it's a little, just nice little shotgun blast, which will be serving us throughout pretty much the entire run. I have one other familiar that I am going to use just for marathon safety, which we'll see later on. But I'll go ahead and describe one of the main facets of Lucah's combat right here, since track 1 is pretty simple. We just picked up Healing Essence, which is our health boosts we have. They restore at rest points, kind of like Estus or things like that. But the main facet of Lucah's combat system is mantras, which are, you see how my character's blue right now. I am using a mantra that is blue called Luna. And there are about 10+ different mantras throughout the game, each with unique combat styles, different hold actions, just different abilities overall. And you're allowed to mix and match 2 different sets of those. One as your default, which influences your light attacks, and your main bonus you get from it, and the second one influencing your heavy attack and giving you a side bonus. So I'm going to pick up a prayer bead here, which influences another mechanic in Lucah, which is virtues. Virtues are essentially character modifiers that allow you to add different abilities to your character over time as you acquire them. And they have point values associated to them. So the more virtue points you have, the more abilities you'll be able to equip. And that will be pretty useful for us throughout this run. All right, so we're coming up on our first real boss here, which is the Hive. The Hive can be a little particular depending on how it wants to set up its patterns. But we want it to attack us. We want one of them to attack us as fast as possible. Not quite like that, but that'll work. That will indeed work. If I could, you know. All right, so we're gonna do something a little different, and we're gonna free Michael here, which is our little friend who's gonna help us out throughout this little segment. And we're just gonna deal with this. Like I said before, the Hive is a little tricky to deal with, simply because there's just so much different things, so many different things it can do with its patterns. That'll be a recurring theme for some bosses. Some of the main bosses that we have more issues with is that setting up patterns for the bosses is a little tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and swap my secondary mantra here to Anima, which gives me a little bit more attack speed, which makes some things later on a little bit easier. And we equipped our first virtue there, which is, oh goodness, I believe it's Enraged. It gives us more damage after a perfect dodge or parry. And parry is a mechanic I didn't quite mention when we picked up, but essentially if you dodge an enemy with perfect timing, you get a parry. It's a pretty common staple in some character action games. All right, and we're coming up on a cutscene here, which is pretty basic. Just this guy is talking to us about you know, being saved and things like that. And we get a nice little cutscene we're going to skip over, and his friends are going to come in and let him know that something's going on outside, and maybe we should go take a look at that. And his son, Christian here, is like, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't take a look at that. But we're going to ignore that, because you know, we like seeing what things are about here. And then we get outside, and it's pretty okay. Everything seems fine here. And we're just going to, hello, Messiah. Goodbye, Messiah. We'll see him later, don't you worry. Messiah will be coming back. And that is track 2 for the most part. Track 2 is probably the shortest one in the game. It's essentially just a cutscene, that, and then this single enemy we are gonna wipe the floor with just real quick. So you will see a lot of use of hold actions throughout the entirety of this run, simply because they are probably the best, if not the second best way of dispatching enemies that are broken or parried. And now we are going to go into our level up system here. Our main focus for levels is stamina and attack damage, for the simple sake of the fact that stamina allows us to have more attacks, and attack damage allows those attacks to deal more damage. That won't be all we'll be getting, but it is the majority, since it is what we want to really be focusing on. So if you guys have any donations or anything like that, this is a solid little point to read them. Or if not, I can just keep commentating. All right. So this is a train system. It's just the little way the developer put in to just get across this area a little faster. There are some sneaky little secrets hidden in this train system that we aren't really going to be looking at, but it's fun in the main game. I want to give a quick shout out to Colin, the main developer of Lucah, for being so just amazingly open about pretty much everything, while doing his best to, you know, keep special things secret, you know, not spoil all the fun of it. But Colin is an amazing guy who developed this amazing game, and I highly recommend you just go give him a big shout out on Twitter. He's an amazing guy at me3. Just very, very nice, very sweet man overall. So our main goal here in track 3 is to get 2 items: the speed pass and the delimiter. And what those items do is those items allow us to finish the area. Pretty simple, right? Well, they're pretty much all locked behind these little sections of combat. And these shield enemies are going to be the bane of my existence, as they are in every run. So there's the speed pass. Thankfully, the delimiter is much easier to acquire. It is guarded by a single enemy, and that enemy is very easy to just bait out a certain pattern. And we see these guys. We're not going to talk to them. They're very angry. So this guy, we do this, and then we parry, or we break him, and then we hit him with a hold action. And that's probably one of the more consistent enemies in this game. Like it does the same thing pretty much every time if you run up to it like that. And we are, for all intents and purposes, done with wandering around here in track 3. We just have to go to the end and face off against the boss of the area. And you'll see a bunch of these little rest points littered around. We take very specific ones simply so we don't waste too much time. And now we get another fancy little thing here. Just a nice little train ride. Nothing spooky happening here at all. Definitely not. Definitely not. Definitely nothing wrong here. This seems normal. This seems intended. So we get a little bit more of a story dump here. It's telling us why, or asking us why we don't just give up. And it's pretty spooky. But we're just gonna kind of ignore that and not, we're just gonna gleam over that bit. So here's a character we will not see for the rest of this run. That character is involved in a whole different ending that we're not gonna see. Right? If you want to see more about that, go check out the 100% runs. So this is the Forsaken. Say hello to the Forsaken. Say goodbye to the Forsaken. The Forsaken is a joke. We're gonna stop here and see if we can get a little bit more attack damage before going into the next little boss here. So how the stat system in Lucah works essentially is when you get to enough points in one stat, it kind of it pulls it out of the lineup and puts in a different stat to try to encourage you to spread things out a little more. So here's Christian again. He's pretty upset that we invited that cool big Messiah man over to his house, and he's kind of mad that Messiah wrecked his house. So he's gonna beat us up, or he's gonna try his best. He's gonna try his best. We're trying to get a parry on him here. A break will work just as well, and that just wipes him out. Say goodbye, Christian. He'll be coming back later. And now we can move on. And now we're in track 4, which is not one of the bigger ones, but probably one of the more challenging ones for a lot of people who come in, because there are a lot of combat challenges in this area and a lot of things like that. So this is kind of like the infinite staircase in Mario, where it just does not let you proceed until that happens. So yeah, don't waste your time. You won't be going anywhere. So welcome to track 4. This is the suburbs. And we're going to be wandering around here, picking up one particular item, which is a videotape, which allows us to get a key code we need to progress through the area. And you will see very little of this game's actual depth in its combat and things like that here, simply for the sake of the fact that there are probably 3 mantras that we use in this run, if anything. And I should get the code. 462. That is our code for this run. Is 462. I'm just going to stop here and get one more quick level, just because I can, just for safety. So we need to go up here. We need to go up here and put in our code. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. All right. So up here is a nice little door, where if we do not put in the code correctly. If we don't put in the code correctly, then a bunch of very difficult to kill enemies spawn, and we don't want that. That adds like 2 minutes to the run. It is essentially a run killer if that happens. So yeah, there are a bunch of just a bunch of little combat trials throughout this area, and we're just gonna go through and wipe them out best we can. And there's this guy up here who just likes being in trouble sometimes, but not today. Sometimes he'll fly off the screen when you hit him with a heavy attack or something like that. He is a monster. I do not like him one bit. But yeah, that is the majority of this little area, is just wiping the floor with these enemies, getting them out of the way, and proceeding to get into the more interesting areas of the run, which are coming up here soon. If you know, if this guy would cooperate, there we go. There's a lot of fun stuff that happens sometimes in these runs. Wonderful. It's a lot of manipulating enemies to do what you want, and also kind of manipulating the combat to do what you want after you've kitted yourself out. And upcoming is probably one of my favorite, just little bam. Just one of the most consistent little enemy patterns, because it's just so fun to do. It's one of my favorites. You just hit them twice, you shoot them, and then use your hold action, and that's all there is to it. It's really nice. All right. So we are coming up to another NPC here who we're not going to interact with at all. They're gonna talk to us, and then they're gonna do what they got to do. There they go. They're hopping down there. They're fine. Don't worry. But that path leads to an optional boss that adds a couple minutes, and we don't want to do that. So for those of you who don't watch Lucah runs, most runners don't go down here to get this prayer bead, but my run involves a whole different setup of virtues that give me a little bit more of an advantage later on, that kind of negates the other time that getting the extra virtue adds. And we want to pick that prayer bead up so we can actually equip the virtue when we get it. And I will talk more about that here in just a second. We're going into track 5 here. I'm going to stop running, because if you go through this little loading zone before the screen loads in, it soft locks the game, and that's no fun for anybody. So we're going down here, and anyone who's played Lucah is probably like freaking out, because like from what I've seen at least, about 60% of the people who've played Lucah have not ever seen this little area, because it's just so well hidden. But this is a little area full of enemies, and we get our fancy new little virtue at the end, which we very much need. There we go. But it's just essentially, it is a few waves of enemies. There are, yeah, 4 waves of enemies here. There's these guys, which we're going to see a couple more up here in a minute. And then there's those the little bat things, these guys. So yeah, sometimes these enemies just do not like to play ball. Oh my goodness. But sometimes these enemies don't like to play ball with what we want to do here. So we just kind of got to play around them. Like that. Sometimes these guys will just do that. And nobody likes that. So now we've opened up our path here to go over to get this virtue here, which is hated. Hated doubles the damage dealt to me, but also doubles the damage that I deal to enemies, which makes it very, very useful for a lot of bosses later on in the run. So we're just going to go down here, pop back out, and we're going to take a quick little heal before we go out to do Arena, which is probably one of my favorite parts of the game, because it's just amazing to mess around with the different systems here in Arena. But we do 3 particular missions here in Arena. The goal here is to get 3 S ranks in these fights. Our goal is to get 3 S ranks here so we can progress to the final champion battle. And it's very lenient if you know what you're doing. It's a lot less lenient in New Game Plus. But for our purposes, we won't really have much of an issue with it. You'll notice me probably taking the next menu in that little menu we just saw a little bit slow. For the simple sake of the fact that if I miss menu, I'll go into a whole separate battle, which adds about a minute. And we really don't want to do that, because melee is one of the least consistent fights in Arena. Brawl, Encounter, and Duel are the 3 that we really want to mess with, and this guy is not going to play ball with us today. Oh my goodness. That's all right. We are safe to take a death or 2 without really killing the pace of the run. Sometimes these arena battles can be a little iffy, but usually they're fine. Oh, and that is what I meant by mismenuing, because if I mismenu, I will pretty much botch the entire thing. And nobody wants that. Thankfully, you can just walk in and out, which I discovered only recently. But if you go into that fight, you know, actually doing the battle, then it can really mess you over. Thankfully, we got the pattern we wanted that time, so it was much easier. So now we're going to go into Champion here, which is the final encounter here in Arena. It faces some, it holds some difficult nightmares. Has a couple of those big sword enemies. And here's the Cardinal. He's an interesting guy. And there's that egg from earlier. Hey, that's not an egg. That's a person. So yeah, these guys are interesting. If you get far enough away from them, they'll do the pattern you want them to do, which is they'll rear up for like a really big swing, which is very easy to parry. But if you're too close to them, they'll do an AoE, or their big charge swings, which have a little bit of a different window. And there's Michael again. Hey, look at that. The gang's all here. So here's some dogs. People don't like these dogs because they're very mean. And you know, these guys are a little creepy. And now they're going to send 2 more dogs after us because why not? Why not? Thankfully, the dog's parry windows are much easier to actually get a grip on than it looks. It looks a lot more iffy than it is. And nothing bad here. Oh no. Well, say goodbye to Michael, everybody. He's not going to be coming back. And as you would expect, the little sister there, Sarah, is not very happy about this. And she is gonna try to beat us up for some reason. Don't really know why, but she is quite upset. And hopefully we can get the pattern we want with her. Sometimes she can be a little mean. There we go. Got that one shot. That is what we were looking for. So coming up here, we're gonna be picking up the mantra that we're gonna be using for the rest of the game, which is BIOS. And I'll go ahead and describe what BIOS does real quick. It is a more long-range mantra with weaker hits, but its hold action allows us to stack a damage and attack speed buff on ourselves up to 3 times, which we are going to use and abuse on some bosses coming up later to just completely destroy them. So we are coming up to the start of track 6 here, the start of the highway section, and we're going to buy the other mantra that we're going to be using for the rest of the game, which is Erebos. We're also picking up our marathon safety ability, which is heal, and I'm going to go ahead and hop over here and equip those real fast. You don't have to be in these areas to equip mantras, as we saw a little while ago, but it makes things a little bit safer, and you're right here by like a rest point, so you can get your levels and everything in, so you don't have to stop too many times. And we got a couple more levels of attack damage, which is going to suit us really well going later on into the game. But we're going to come up here, and we're gonna see one of our old friends again. We're going to see our good friend Christian for the second time, and he has settled down considerably since we last saw him. He's mellowed out a little bit. He's chilling, and we're going to have a nice conversation that we are not going to look at, because we are speedrunners and we don't really care about dialogue. And we're just gonna mash this dialogue as quickly as we can. There we go. And we get a couple more lines here, and then we fight, as you do. Right? Christian 2 is a little bit more iffy than Christian 1. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you really just get what you want, and that's nice. So we're gonna just return to the last checkpoint here, which saves about 20 seconds over just walking back to this this little rest point, which is a godsend of a thing to discover after you've been running this game for like a month. So what we got from Christian was this key, which allows us to progress into the highway proper. And the highway is probably one of the more difficult areas in the game for most of the runners, simply for the sake of the fact that there's a lot of enemies here that nobody really likes to fight. And we'll see one of those coming up here in just a second. the bane of every Lucah player's existence coming up right here. Our friend, the roly-poly. And sometimes he likes to play ball and, you know, work with us. And the rest of the time, he's just kind of rude. Ah, you love to see it. So we don't really have the tools to take him down as easily at the moment. We'll be getting the main tool that most of the Lucah runners use. A couple screens from here. But usually what we prefer to do is parry him when he starts up his roll. But sometimes those parry windows can be a little short, and we miss it. And that's mostly just me because I'm terrible. But hey, we're doing it. All right. We get these nice little spiders here who have very, very generous parry windows. You'd love to see it. You're getting to see the benefit of the second mantra we picked up, Erebos, which deals more damage to broken enemies. And we're going to pick up Repellent here, which allows us... Oh, I should put on Anxious too. That's kind of important. But all of these bundled together allow us to generate charge, which lets us do hold actions and familiar abilities. And it allows us to repel bullets. So on the off chance we miss our parry windows, we can just do that, which makes those fights significantly easier. So you can kind of see me using the hold action for BIOS a lot now, because it buffs my attacks so much that it is a waste not to use it. And now we have gotten the bridges lined up to where we can progress through the area, and we have gotten our key, which allows us to open up the gate at the end of the area. And I'm going to go ahead and pop a heal here just to be a little safe. These enemies are really not nice. And I'm gonna take a little bit of safety here. Oh boy. And get a heal in here. There we go. These enemies have killed me more times than I can count, so I'm being a little more careful with them. I would really not like to take a second death if I don't have to. So we're coming up here to the end of the area. We get to fight a nice little mini boss, but we're going to take some levels first. Hopefully we can get some good stats here. In my practice run, I was getting really, really shafted by stats. But thankfully, we're getting good RNG at the moment. So we're just going to give this guy a nice little taunt, and hopefully he'll do what we want, which is that. Yeah, like I said earlier, a lot of this game is just manipulating enemy patterns to get them to do what you want. And there's like a variety of ways to do this. Like they change based on distance, based on difficulty. They get more aggressive when you taunt them. Like there's all sorts of little things you can do that haven't really been optimized at the peak of their potential. And I would love to see them get optimized more. Because I'm probably the main speedrunner of this game right now. The community's a little short-handed at the moment. We have two other main runners. We have Austin, who does like 100%, and we have Lord Shade, who does the same category that I'm doing here, but normal instead of easy. And they've both been a little absent at the moment due to like stuff in real life. So at the moment, the Lucah speedrun is kind of up in the air, really. But yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier with abusing BIOS on one particular boss. Because with 3 full charges, you can just absolutely obliterate the depths here. He's gonna drop 2 of his little ads here on us, because you know, big boss has to have ads. Not fair if it doesn't. There we go. All right, now we're gonna be going into phase 3 here, which is he's a little beefier and he attacks a little faster, but aside from that, pretty much the exact same as phase 1. We're just going to do this, give him a taunt, parry up, and he's done. And that is the end of the depths. We're going to be coming up here on a little escape sequence, as it were. And our friend here, a friend is going to be popping out here. Our friend Lily here is going to be popping out to help us out get through this area. And she's going to point out that there's a crane back there, so let's go jump off the crane into this big monster. Because that's a good idea. Sounds like something straight out of Monster Hunter. So we're going to get a couple more of the little roly-poly enemies, because Colin is a cruel man sometimes and likes to torture his players. And again. Ooh. Yeah, sometimes they'll be nice. Sometimes they won't. Thankfully, they're being kind to us right now. So we're on a pretty good pace to get out of here. Usually I get to this, I finish the roly-polies at around a 120. So we're on a pretty good pace at the moment. And that is pretty much the end of the escape sequence. We're going to go ahead and climb up the crane and hop down and see what awaits us. Which is a creepy little area with this weak little guy here. We're not going to pay any mind to, and we're just going to kind of obliterate him. And there we go. Now we're moving on into track 7, which is Lethian. And Lethian is another one of the more difficult ones, because the combat challenges you get throughout the area get a lot more difficult. It starts to follow like Lucah follows a pretty DMC style of introducing enemies. Pretty much in most every area, you'll get introduced to a new enemy type that make things a little more difficult and kind of mix things up a little bit. And we are getting to the point where attack damage starts spawning a lot less. Yeah, these guys here are new to this area, and what they do is they will buff other enemies, which we very much don't want, because the buffed enemies attack a lot faster, hit a lot harder, and are more likely to just completely wipe us out. These guys are also new to this area, and they are just they just swing. That's all they do. They swing and then they teleport around if they hit you. They're really not fun to fight. They're easier if you just take care of them. They attack twice. Ooh, that was a close one. All right. Sometimes these gates, which are what these little areas in particular are called, can be a little tricky. But Gate 2 in particular is probably the one that destroys the most runs, for the sake of the fact that if you die in Gate 2, you have to go through the entire area again, which is really rough on a run. It adds a few minutes at worst, because you do have to go through the combat for each of the enemies again. You don't have to redo the gates you've already finished, but each of these encounters takes around 20 to 30 seconds, depending. And there's the cutscene, so it can really ruin the pace of your run if you're not careful. All right. And after this, we're going to be coming up on Gate 2. All right, come on, buddy. Thank you. So we'll get to see what makes Gate 2 a lot more difficult coming up. We're a lot more difficult for the people who don't really have much practice with it. The combinations of enemies that come in are pretty rough to deal with. Like, there's one of these big guys to start, which isn't too difficult. But coming up, you get to see like these guys combined with the other big 3-hit guys. And if this guy here gets buffed, he is destructive, like overall. Like he is very rough to deal with. But thankfully, we don't have much to worry about here. So we're going to take a moment and get a few more levels, see if we can maybe stack up our damage a little bit more. If the game wants to cooperate with us, give us the stats we want. But it seems like, yeah, it seems like it just wants us to stand other things at the moment. So we are coming up to the end of Lethian here. These last few little combat encounters. There are a few more of these, and then we enter into Gate 3, which has our final boss for the area. And thankfully, these enemies aren't too difficult to deal with if they don't swing at you from off screen, I should say. But we are coming up on the tail end of the run here, because after Gate 3, we go into track 8. which is one last time. It is the final leg of the game with the last 2 bosses in it. And now we talked to Lily here, and she's quite sad, and she is going to turn into a big monster who's going to attack us. We get another cutscene, and then we unlock the final mechanic of the game, which is Transform. And what Transform does is it heavily buffs all of your stats, but it makes the percentage gauge up there on the top right go up insanely fast. So we'll be abusing that in the Ascent. Percentage isn't really an issue for us here in neutral ending. It's much more of an issue in like 100% or runs that get to New Game Plus. But for us, we're able to abuse that as much as we like. So now we're going to be going up here into the Ascent, which is, again, the final area. We're climbing up the radio tower from the earlier cutscene with Christian. And, yeah, this is a small little portion of this is waiting as we go up these elevators. So if there's anything to read or anything like that, you can do it during these little elevator sections or through the Ascent overall. It's pretty combat-driven. But if not, I'll just keep trucking here. All right. But yeah, we'll be using Transform and heavy attacks to just dispatch these enemies as quickly as we can. Because it is a joke how easy these enemies are to just wipe out with Transform. And we are on a pretty decent pace going into the end of the Ascent. So we'll see how this goes. So we are going up our second elevator, which is a little bit longer. It also has a couple of enemies that will spawn in it here in just a second. And we'll just get here in a position where we can just knock them out. There we go. And that's that. The Ascent is full of all sorts of little fun, little tricks you can do with combat. Because, honestly, it's pretty linear. Like, there's not a lot to really do or say here, if I'm being completely honest. It's mostly just combat and getting to the end, and we'll have a lot more to really say about things when the final bosses come up, because there are a lot of actual mechanics coming in play. But most of this is again, just these little combat trials and getting rid of these enemies as quickly as you can. It's a fun little thing. So you start to see, like, it pretty much just tosses most every big enemy in the game back at you, which is really fun. In a casual playthrough, it's a fun challenge, especially if you've been having like issues or just been wandering around throughout the game. You can't really abuse Transform as much as you would here in a run. But that is the end of the Ascent, and we are about to go into our final rest point and head into the last couple of bosses. So we're going to see what we can get going into the end here. It looks like we have a pretty solid stat layout overall for like these final couple of fights. We shouldn't have any issues. In some runs where the RNG decides that we're having a bad run, if the RNG decides to just kill our run, it'll give us near no attack damage, and we'll just not do enough damage to quickly finish off these last 2 bosses, which is really rough. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch back over to BIOS here. It'll help me out a lot in these in this last fight, or in these last 2 fights, I should say. You can kind of assume who the final boss of this little area is going to be. It's Christian. Of course it's Christian. He's kind of like our little main antagonist throughout the game so far, and he's just giving us more story stuff about what's going on here. But his main thing is he's angry and he wants to fight. And now we actually get access to taunt, which we've been using the whole game, but that's fine. There we go. If you're lucky, you can get a quick cycle on this final boss this final phase of the boss by doing enough damage to him in the second phase, and it'll just automatically roll over to this little cutscene, and you can move around during it and just prep yourself and come up here to the front. But we got rid of him pretty close to the front anyway, so it's not too bad. And now we're going into the final boss here. I should say for the people behind the scenes that time will be coming up after this boss when the screen like wipes the white. So we're going to come up here and we're just going to taunt him right out the gate, hit some of these bullets back, get through that first phase as quick as we can. If we're lucky, these guys will... Yeah, if it feels kind, we'll be able to just take care of this boss in a reasonable fashion. There we go. That's phase 2. Coming up on the last phase here. It can be a little tricky. So I'm gonna, yeah, we'll take it a little safe. There we go. Screen and time is gonna be coming up here in just a second. And time. Oh my goodness. Oh. That was a very, very good run. That was I believe about 4 seconds off my current record for the category. So even with the mistakes, that was an amazing paced run. And now we get our little cutscene here at the end. And I'm just going to take this time to give a couple of quick shout-outs. Like to give a big shout-out to the entire Me Less Than 3 team, Colin, Kevin, the PR guy, the PR and director, Nico, who did most of the music. He did all the music for the game, and Brianna, who did a lot of the key art for the game. You guys are all amazing. Thank you for this amazing game. Big shout-out to my wife behind me, who's been helpful throughout this entire trip and everything like that. And just big shout out to everyone who helped me get here and everything like that. So thank you all very much.